Hello and welcome to the Blackout Podcast, where I get to talk to amazing people who do amazing things. And today I have Chiedza Jones, working mom and professional juggler. Thanks for coming to the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. You did. I know the professional juggler part made me laugh, but honestly, I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Okay, so Chiedza, the name isn't obviously Nova Scotian.
No.
So let's start with that. Where's the name from?
So the name is from Zimbabwe. So it means light or dawn. It's a Shona name. So Zimbabwe is where I'm from. And I liked to believe for the longest time that I was given that name because I was light in my parents' life. Apparently, I was named after a child that they liked, but that's
what
they do.
You know, this is the second time I'm hearing a story. Like, parents need to learn how to lie to their kids. Really. Yesterday, I was at a thing, and then there's this lady. Her name is Yvonne, and then there's this man. You should know Yvonne Chaka Chaka, right?
Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
So I'm like, is that what they named you after? And she's like, I thought that's what they named you after. And then my parents told me. I'm like, what? No, they should just, anyway, okay.
The story is never as good. But I think for me, I find that names are very, very important from our culture, where we come from. So Zimbabwe, being Shona, names are very, very important. I don't want to generalize Africa, but I feel like that's the general sense across a lot of cultures, is that when a name is given to you, there's something that's being spoken over you based on the meaning. Mm-hmm. So regardless of the fact that I was, named after a child that they liked, I think for me, I still see it as, okay, anytime that I'm introducing myself as Chiedza. Anytime someone is calling me, they're calling me Chiedza. And so there's a lot of importance there for me to say, okay, that's my name, Chiedza. It means light. So I have a sort of obligation, if you will, to be light in a situation as best as I can, because that's what's being called out of me. And that's what I'm also calling out of myself anytime my name is said. Yeah, it works. It works when you know what your name means.
Right. But do you feel like you are kind of also putting pressure on yourself?
I don't think so. I think I extend grace to myself where I fall short in terms of that. I will be the first to say I am not light in every situation. But I think if I think of maybe where sort of that comes from, is there's also a faith-based aspect to it, where it's just like, the power of your words. So for me, faith-wise, I'm a Christian, and so there's power in your words. So if you're saying something, or if you're calling someone something, like there's meaning to that. So I think it's sort of not so much the expectation that you have to be, but it's just a reminder that this is who you are, especially if at any point you don't feel like that's what you are. Then that's a reminder of like, no, I'm Chiedza. That's who I am. So not so much that I'm solely called to be light in a situation, but I can just remind myself that you can still be a light in this situation if you haven't been, or if you're doubting yourself, or your capabilities, or whatever it may be. So I think that's where the importance is for me. And then I've sort of passed that on to my kids, hopefully, in terms of what their names are and their meanings.
Yeah, what are they?
So they have 3 names each, but I think which all have meaning. But they're Shona names. So my daughter's name is Minana, which is miracles or wonders. And my son's name is Gwinyai, which means to be strong and united.
Which one came
Shona
first?
As well. Which child came first? Yeah. Minana.
Oh, so how is she a miracle?
Yeah, well, she's obligated to work out miracles and whatnot. So for that, when we named her that, I think initially for us, it was really just, that God is going to work out miracles in her life and through her. But having her, and I think just watching her grow, for me is it's literally just, and not just for her, human life and kids when they grow is awe-inspiring for me. It's miraculous for me how you wake up one day and you can't do anything for yourself, and then 2 months from now you're learning to do this and learning to do that. So I think for me that was sort of the aha moment in terms of having her as my firstborn, and having her with that name was oh yeah, she inspires all within me. by being able to see how she's growing and saying, okay, wow, God is amazing because he's working out a miracle and she's just a miracle, and, just how she's growing and developing over time. So I think that's where it comes from. The names get hard to say depending on where in the world you are, and then you get called all sorts of things.
Minana is pretty straightforward. It's the boy's name that
Gwinyai, yeah. So we're calling him by his second name, Omari. But yeah, Gwinyai seems to be hard to say for some people, and I think Minana too. When people see it,
I don't think what you should do. You should tell them, like, if you can say Guyana, the country.
Yeah, then you can say Gwinyai. Yeah, just like Minana. Now I get it with my name because Chiedza, which people can say once they break down, but I get a lot of Chiedza. A lot of it. I've been called all sorts of things. It's my biggest pet peeve because when I break it down and I say to people, Chi as in cheese, Ed as in Edward, Za as in Zara. If you can say those things, you can say my name.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, I've been very intentional as well about, just because your name isn't a name that a lot of people have heard, it doesn't mean that you have to conform to like, oh, let me use my second name, Lilius, because then people can say it easily. You will learn to say my name.
It's true. It's true. Because that's not, like, the person's name isn't my language. So there was a video I saw of this lady and she was being introduced by, I think it wasn't BBC, but some English thing. And she kept correct. I think it was a Nigerian. I'm not sure. I can't recall now. But she kept correcting the lady, this is how you say my name. And the internet, the internet is just the worst place, man. Everyone just had a comment about that. Okay, so one thing I like doing is kind of going back.
Yeah.
Just getting to this time travel machine and going back. And one thing I'm curious about, which is, what things did you want to be when you were growing up?
So when I was in grade 2... I wrote a letter. You have those assignments of what do you want to be when you grow up. And I said I wanted to be...
If you went to one of the good schools.
I went to one of the...
Exactly.
That was not a common assignment.
No, if you went to one of the good schools, then they'll ask you stuff. You went to one of those schools where the teacher is like, whatever. Okay.
That's true. And I wanted to be a teacher.
What?
I wanted to be a teacher when I was in second grade. And then I wanted to be an air hostess. And then I wanted to be a police officer.
Why are you not choosing these difficult things?
This was when I was young. This was when I was small. Right. When I got more serious about career, I actually wanted to be an actress. An actress and a director, and actually applied for an art school and got in. I was 17 at that time, so it was an art school in South Africa called AFDA. Yes, so I got in and I was in Cape Town.
Holy shit.
So I got in and I wanted to go. And like law school was also like playing in the back of my mind, but I really, really was passionate and still am passionate about the arts. Really wanted to be an actress. I was like, Hollywood, here we come.
Right.
And then I had a conversation with my uncle, and he was like, you need to have a backup plan because these African parents, you need to have a backup plan. And so I shifted.
What was the backup plan?
The backup plan then was to do, I decided to do international development studies, which is what I ended up doing. I think perhaps it's one of those fields of study where it's like, when I grow up, I want to be like, there isn't like a set, then I will be and this is the name of like the occupation, right? But I think it also came in at a time where Zimbabwe, again, where I'm from, was going through a lot, which it's still going through. And I just became very curious about like, what are the issues in the country that I'm from and why are these issues and how did we get here? And I didn't want to get those solutions from propaganda. I wanted to actually go to school and study and get a good sense of like, why are we where we are as a country? when we used to be like the breadbasket of Africa. What made those changes? So I pivoted, away from the arts and into international development studies.
Okay, so it's funny you mentioned that you want to be a hostess, a police officer, and a teacher.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, all those things are in your international development thing.
This is
you get to travel.
Yes.
As a air hostess, you get to kind of police set up policies.
Yeah, that's true.
And you get to teach because you say, this is what I learned. This is how we're going to do
it.
So,
right. That's true. It all came together. Thank you.
You know what I'm learning lately is that is that thing you want to be as a child.
Yeah.
That we should kind of focus on. And if you think of the things like now, I know you kind of just pivoted, ended up where you are, but you love it. It's because this little Chiedza girl always wanted to be that thing, and now she, Chiedza, the woman, gets to do all these things that she wanted to do back then.
Right. It's true. It's true. That makes sense. And I think it's sort of looking at like those dreams that you have as a child and how they contribute to what you then end up doing as an adult. So that for me has been good because even with the arts, I'm not an actress.
No, but if you want to take it further, I wouldn't finish like that was just the first part. So the second part is like the acting and the directing.
Right.
You also kind of do that. Because there are meetings where you just have to be like, this person is talking bullshit.
Oh, and then just act and be like, that totally makes sense. So you still get to
and then the directing part, if you're working with a team, you kind of have to get people to do the things that you want to do. So all those things you want to do is still in there. That. Yeah, I mean, and then you also have the spoken word as an album. But we'll get to that.
Right.
So you did the international thing, and
I did.
You did it in Zim or
no. So I started at St. Mary's University. Sorry, I was just going to say I came here straight for university.
Because of like what was happening in Zim and stuff.
Well, not so much that. So I think there's some people who chose to stay and do university there. I think for me, it's so tricky because it's like if you stay, it doesn't necessarily mean, and a lot of people who don't have like the resources to go out will stay, and for some of them, they are able to make things out of that. Out of, education, are able to maybe, whether it's starting their own business, getting involved with other businesses that are existing. I don't want to make the situation seem too peachy because the unemployment rate is high. For a lot of people, they're graduating and don't know what's next, if they can even get into, post-secondary education. But for me, I really wanted to go out and be somewhere else. I think a small part of it is like wanting that like experience of being, far away from home and whatnot. I think it was also part of that. If, at least if you're out there, you get an education out there, then maybe opportunities open up while you're out there. And then you're in a place that's more stable economically. And so for me, it was like after university, then went to St. Mary's University.
How did you pick Canada though?
Very good question. There was a lady who was, she was an agent for universities, and she said there are some universities. It's not a fabulous like here it is story. Like it's just she was like there are 2 universities here. There were scholarships that were available. She said there are 2 universities here. Winnipeg, the University of Winnipeg, I think, and St. Mary's University. Pick what you want to apply, and the first university that gets back to you, that's the one you'll go to. And it happened to be St. Mary's University. So it worked out. The scholarship did not come through.
Oh, no.
But it did not come through. But it worked out.
Yeah, no, I was shaking my head because I've been to Winnipeg and it's lovely. Don't get me wrong. It's beautiful. And talking of film, their tax credit is, I have to make a film there sometime. But everyone is like, you don't want to be here in winter. Because apparently their winter is nuts. And I'm like, someone's like -40. I'm like, what do you even do there? Apparently,
I don't know.
everyone has a thing where you have to kind of like have to plug your car in so like your battery gets like warm or else you won't be able to start. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing that.
Could never be me.
Okay, so you moved to
me,
St. Mary's. How was St. Mary's for you?
It was good. It was good. At that time, I think I stayed on campus, so it was good. I think even just as far as culture shock, and when I say culture shock, for me, it was really just, to be honest, being in a country where for the first time not most of the people look like you, right? Which is not completely unusual. I mean, in Zimbabwe we have white people, so that wasn't unusual. But I think again, it's like you're sort of like in the minority. That is different, right? You have to sort of like think through that. Again, you take for granted that you're back home and people know how to say your name, things like that, and you get here and that's not the case. But I appreciated that there was I would say a tight-knit African community that was at St. Mary's University. And so I had a couple of people who I knew. I really felt at home. And that, I think that really helped. Even, then of course, like getting involved with like the rest of like, society, for lack of a better word. But I think it helped having those people around as sort of like support and a piece of home as well.
Did you meet other Zimbabweans when you were in the...
I did.
Mary's?
Yeah, they weren't too many back then. Now there are a lot. And so in most cases, you don't know other Zimbabweans and you meet them for the first time and that's different. But before, most people knew each other when I came. That was 2011.
And what did you do right out of school?
But right out of university, I went and I did my master's in international development studies.
You like school, man. What?
I love to learn. I love to learn. I was like, okay, let's do
was
this.
it also
master's.
in St. Mary's?
Also in St. Mary's, yeah. Also at St. Mary's.
And I was like, okay, so what's the difference though? Like, what would be the difference between that first degree and your master's?
And your master's degree, outside of just the expectation of like, wow, you're so amazing. You're just, and I think it's interesting because I was actually talking to somebody about it recently that I think it's sort of this expectation of like, just keep pushing with school to show how smart you are, when there's so much more that, I think helps you grow professionally outside of degrees. But for me, I think for me, it was an opportunity to sort of zone in on what I was interested in at that time. So for my undergraduate degree, I focused on food security and policy. But of course, you do like a lot of other courses. And so my master's degree was an opportunity for me to really hone in on food security and policy in sub-Saharan Africa. Because again, at the time, the UN was the dream and, I'll get this degree. I have my master's degree and, it'll open up more opportunities for me. And then we'll go from there.
Food security, why though?
Because Zimbabwe, so where we had started off with Zimbabwe was just like, this was like a net exporter of food as far as Zimbabwe was concerned.
What was
in the 80s.
Exporting?
Maize, among other things. But as far as maize was concerned, which was also like our staple food, like we were a net exporter, right? And then you get to like the 2000s where it's like we're importing food that is supposed to be our own staple food. Never mind like the economic challenges and issues and inflation rate that was on its own level. That was a time
when it was big on the internet and someone was like, was it $1 trillion or $1 billion?
I would pay $3 trillion to like take the bus, what we call like the bus. We call it like a combi, like a commuter omnibus is like the formal term. Yeah, I would pay $3 trillion at that time. And it was crazy because what money that was valuable in the morning would not have been valuable by the end of the day, right? So if you look at like Google, as reliable as it hopefully is, our inflation rate got as high as about like 6 trillion%, something.
Holy
6 trillion.
Shit.
Yeah, and here we are like, a couple percent, inflation here is a big deal.
Right.
Yeah. So when you're looking at
people
inflation,
like,
that was, it was crazy. And so food was, the way that I saw it, I think, outside of, I think as far as just the economic well-being of the country, food was a big part of it, And so that's why I got into food security and policy in terms of looking at our land reform program that we had in the country, which was the now this gets a little bit political in terms of how you sort of put it, right? Whether it was the taking or the taking back of land from white settlers back into the hands or ownership of Black farmers or Black individuals, because not all of them were farmers, and how that impacted our economy. So I was very, very interested in that, and then did focused, hence the reason why it was food security and policy. Yeah.
So, I guess, to the lay person, what is food security?
So food security is, wow, we're getting academic here. I'm like, so food security is, it really can be broken down into sort of like four aspects, but it really is people having enough access. It can be economic access or physical access to food when they need it, and that food also being adequate for their nutritional needs. So at the very basic level, that is food security, that one would be considered to be food secure if all of those areas were taken care of.
Okay. So, I mean, you study that, and then did you like apply for UN or?
No, because then you realize that, you know, as an immigrant, maybe the bigger priority at that time is maybe permanent residence and just stay and make sure that, you know, you are able to create opportunities or better opportunities for yourself. But I wanted to work in my field, which I know is very, very difficult for a lot of people who work in international development studies and decide to stay here, right? A lot of them, it's like, well, you have to have a job so that you're able to apply. And so people will maybe work for like the banks or whatever it may be. But I really, really wanted to work in my field at that time. And so I worked for an organization that is focused on food security, but also food banks. And so providing food to individuals who are in need. But also going beyond that to also focusing on policy and how it is that policy can be influenced in order to ensure that people have access to food. And that was here in Halifax. So that worked excellently for me because I was able to in some way stay, but also work in my field where I could still focus on food security and policy, but more focused on Nova Scotia specifically.
Is that Feed Nova Scotia?
It is. It is.
Yeah, no,
yeah,
like,
it is.
Because, you know, when you mentioned food bank, I was like, it could be any place. But once you added policy, I was like, it has to be them.
Yes, it was.
How was your experience working there?
I loved it. I really enjoyed the work that we were doing. I think one thing that I've learned about places, and it's not so much the place, but the work, right? One thing I've learned about places where you are trying to push for policy change is policy change takes time. So it's the long game,
yes.
Right? It's the
yes.
It's the long game. And so I was so passionate about the work, great people where I worked there too. It's the long game when you're looking at policy change. And I think also changing people's perspectives and minds around food security is that a lot of people sort of think about, okay, well, if we donate food, then that solves the problem. And I think less people think so now. I think Feed Nova Scotia has done a great job as far as educating people
I'm
around
from
that.
Those people, like, it's not enough if I give my canned food.
Yeah, no, it's great in terms of addressing an immediate need, right? Somebody needs food today. The best thing that you can do is donate food. But somebody wants to get to a point where they're able to provide food for themselves, provide food for their household. Well, they need a lot more than just, canned food and whatever other donations, fresh food, whatever other donations may come. They need policy change that enables them to be able to work to be able to earn a living that allows them to be able to purchase food for themselves. They need childcare that is either affordable or available if they have children, so that their children are somewhere where they can afford and they can go to work. Because if they don't have anywhere to put their children, then they can't go to work. They need affordable housing, because housing is also a big thing. And so if you are not able to afford your housing, then, it's just, there's so many other things that sort of come up. It gets into even things around sort of like addiction. So we have to look at even addictions, right? Like, how do you support individuals with addictions in terms of accessing food? And I think also even removing the stigma around people who use the food bank. Is the assumption is, if you see somebody who's going to a food bank and they have a nice car, it's like, well, why are you using the food bank? You don't need support. But there's so many things that result in people having to use food banks to access food. And again, like, policy has to address those, right? You can have people who are in debt. You may have people who maybe need their car in order to be able to get around to their next job, but they can't afford food. So there's so many areas there which I think it's important to be able to educate the public around that, so that we're able to put whatever necessary pressure we need to on the powers that be that are able to make those changes policy-wise, so that people can access food. So yeah, the donations, of course, go a long way, but that's not the whole story.
So, okay, well, working there, how long did you work there for?
I was there for 4.5 years.
So,
4.5 years.
Working there, what would you say was like a really bad day?
What was a really bad day working there? Well, my work wasn't front facing, right? So my work wasn't front facing. I would say, what would I say was a really bad day? Nothing out of the ordinary that perhaps one wouldn't have. I think maybe if it is in terms of maybe trying to make change or provide support, is when you know that you can only provide limited support to somebody, right? So there's only so much that I don't work there anymore, but that, or those organizations can do, right? So I think maybe if you're having, if you wish you could provide somebody with additional support, but that maybe, they just lost their job, they're not able to pay their rent, right? Like, organizations that do the work, that food banks, for example, are able to provide the food to maybe get you through the weekend, get you through the week, get you through maybe a couple of weeks, depending on how big the household is and how much that hamper may be. But you can only do what you can do. So I think maybe sometimes there's sort of that sense of like, okay, that's all we can do. And you want to be able to help people as much as you can. But I think it's just the reality of any organization that you're in. Like, your mandate only goes so far. Wow. You can't save the world. So you can only do
all you can do is try.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Exactly. Okay, so we started conversation, talk about names, and you mentioned your kids, and it just hit me that, some of the strongest influences are, like, the really, really powerful women in my life and stuff. And I'm curious, like, what's motherhood been like for you?
It's been wonderful. Do you hear that a lot when you ask people?
I don't. Okay, so here's my thing.
I'm teasing.
I don't ask people about motherhood, but I was just curious about it because you mentioned your name and you talked about them.
Yeah.
And I just, my experience of motherhood is like, I'm in the flight and the baby's crying.
Right, yeah.
Or like, hey, do you want to do this thing? I can't. I don't have a babysitter today.
Right.
So it's like, why would I want that?
What's wonderful? That's why I was like, do you hear that? Because people will probably be like, what do you mean when you say it's wonderful?
So I'm like, but when we're talking about them, just the way you mentioned their names and how important it is that they have those names, and like, okay, so like, you're doing all this saving the world thing. How your kids, like, what's that?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. It's been, when I say, for me, it's, I think when I say it's wonderful, or it's been wonderful, is not to say that it has not been challenging. Because I think most things in life are challenging, but they can still be absolutely beautiful at the same time, right? I think those two things can sort of coexist. I would say, I think when I love to spend time with my children, I love to just see how they're growing. We were talking about it earlier, and I was saying, I think for me, it's just absolutely amazing watching these beings that were born and, you know, literally just needed you for support to just like lift their head up, never mind anything else, right? And now I have a 4-year-old who's, you know, running around. She has her graduation from daycare tomorrow that she's calling a gradulation.
Oh, wow.
And she's super excited about, like, it's just, you see that, and it's absolutely amazing. You know, of course, there are other aspects to it, as far as, you know, sleepless nights and whatnot. But I think when you look at it as a whole, it's just absolutely, absolutely beautiful. And there's purpose in that. There's purpose. I think it's, when I think of the couple of things that I have been called to do in this life, this is one of the greatest ones, is to be able to raise my children. So I absolutely, I love that. I love being a mom. I would not trade it for anything in the world. I may not be able to just up and go the way that I was able to before I had kids. But you know, then you stay at home and you're with them and you say, but this is such a blessing that I cannot take for granted, right? Yeah. So I love it. It's a very different model of parenting from when we were back home because of the amount of support that was there.
It was everybody. Yes, you can go to this auntie's house, so that person will take care of this one.
Exactly.
Versus nobody.
Yeah, it's very different. And
daycare or babysitting.
Which is, you know, is not cheap, right? And so back home, and my mother is currently here visiting for a couple of months, and just been providing like great support with the kids too, which has been super helpful for me. And my husband's parents are also here, so they're also helpful. So we're, compared to what I know is the reality of a lot of people here, we're very spoiled. But it's been interesting having conversations with my mom where we sort of compare what motherhood, and even more so being a working mom, looks like in our different realities. So back home, my mom was a working mom, but because there was help, we had people who would help with cooking, cleaning. I'm always like, I'm not sure about what the PC term is for like, yeah. So we call them like maids back home, right? So you would have your maid who would double up as like the nanny, who would double up as the cook, who would double up as the person who was doing the cleaning. And so if you were a working mom, and I have to say, just because I know that type of help here is a great privilege, back home it's the norm to have that.
You know what, people, everything in life, you kind of need context, right? Because the first thing that shocked, well, so many things about Canada shocked me, but one of the things that shocked me was that I had to put my own gas thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, me too.
What?
Just waiting for somebody to come and be like, okay, how much gas are we putting? Yeah.
So then the next thing was like, oh, something's broken in the house. I have to learn to fix it myself.
Exactly.
So then I realized that Canada is kind of the reverse in like Africa. Labor is cheap.
Yes.
And here's like labor. So like you can see someone driving, like living in a big ass house, and like, that's a plumber's house?
Yeah.
That's a plumber's house.
That's back home.
It's like a plumber is just, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's very
it has
different.
to be put in context. Even there are people here that have access to that. It's just like they are really, you have to be really rich to get that here.
Exactly.
But if you have a job, you can get that in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. That context is important. That, you know, it's not that you have to be filthy rich to be able to have a maid. Like, it's most people will have that type of support in, you know, in some form. And so for my mom, she'd wake up, somebody else was going to get the kids ready for school. By the time she came back home, somebody else had cleaned, somebody had washed the kids, somebody had made supper. I mean, you know, it's just, and now I'm like, okay, somebody else, like somebody else is me.
Yeah.
I'm doing all of that.
Yes.
And so having those conversations with her now is just really interesting because we're also like, I think we take for granted just how much work our maids have to do. And you don't have an appreciation for it until you now have to do it by yourself. And you're like, so we were really putting a lot of pressure on them to, you know, come home and I'm not saying my mom did this. I'm just saying in general, when you hear those conversations where, you know, women will come home and like, well, the kids are washed, but like you missed a spot. You know, I'm exaggerating here. And I'm like, you know, like it's not that easy to do when you have kids who are demanding so much of you. So the juggling, hence the professional juggler, when I laughed, I was thinking about it the other day and I was like, that's literally what you have to be not even to be a working mom, just to be a mom. You have to be a professional juggler because you're juggling so much. Mentally, there's so many things that you're thinking of, decisions that you have to make. If you have work as well, you're trying to juggle work, you're trying to juggle motherhood, you're trying to juggle, you know, how your house has to be clean and presentable and people need to eat. So, but hey, groceries need to be bought for people to eat. And then you need to decide, what are we eating for supper? That is, I think people underestimate like the mental work that even goes into like, what are we eating for supper tonight? With my husband, it's like, again, having to like juggle all of those things, and be very present in all of those spaces. I'm very thankful that my husband is very understanding.
That is the thing. Having a partner that understands and supports you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. And my husband is very supportive. He's very present. Again, we also come from a context where back home, most husbands are not like providing support. you know what I mean? Like they're just not doing that.
Right.
And so you come here, and I'm very thankful that that my husband is very supportive. I think that also comes from having parents that raise you in a way where you can do that. So like shout out to my parents-in-law too, because of course they raised him, right? And so I'm very, very grateful in that sense. But the juggling act is tough. And I come back to like my faith, where I'm like, literally for the juggling to happen, like half the time I don't know how I'm juggling, but I'm just like, okay, God, like you take this, like if they were literally like balls that I was juggling, it's like, okay, you've got this, you've got that, because it's hard. It's hard. And so when you ask me like, how is motherhood? It's absolutely wonderful. It's not easy because you're juggling a lot, and now you actually have the difference, I think, in terms of all of those things, if you were to take motherhood out, is you don't have people who are depending on you. When you have for everything.
You know, I'm old and stuff, and like when my mom comes, I'm like, I just become a baby. I'm like, I'm not doing shit. So I can't even imagine. Yeah.
No, they literally depend on you for. My daughter will say, and I mean, I guess that makes sense. She'll say like, I brushed my teeth yesterday, so you're brushing my teeth today. So, you know, it's like, you can't just be like, go and brush your teeth and put yourself to bed and do this and make your own food. And right, you have to be involved with that. But I think if you don't see like the calling and the beauty of that, you can miss it totally, and you can become like just maybe really, really angry about. People's realities are different, right? I think motherhood is so vast in terms of our experiences, but I think for myself, I have to like, outside of like, you know, you watch your kids and they're joyful and you're happy and you're grateful. I think even in those times when it feels like this is really exhausting, you have to see that there's a lot of beauty in that, in as far as just being called to like raise other human beings, right? And what they could potentially do and be in this life, and the influence that they can have. So yeah, I love it.
Wow.
We're done with the two that we have, but I love it. I love it.
Okay, so I guess, you know, with the air hostess and the thing, it's like you're a kid, whatever.
Yeah.
But with the directing and thing, you actually went as far as applying.
Yeah.
What is it about acting and directing that you wanted to, like, why were you pulled to it? Why did you want to try it, or at least consider trying it?
Storytelling and the ability to be part of stories. I really, really enjoyed that. My brother and I, we would watch movies and then we would like make up movies and we would act them and like cut and action. And well, I like, did the cut first, like action, and then like you do something and you cut. And then, and we would record, like back then they had like the home videos where you record. So my dad was big on like capturing moments and everything. So sometimes
so
we
you
would
must
do
have
that.
a lot of baby,
We have tons.
That is so cool. That is so
we have
cool.
tons. Yeah. And so I think for me, it was just the ability to tell stories. When I went to high school, I was in the drama club. And then you'd have like competitions. We had the National Institute of Allied Arts, where you'd perform and you would get a grade. So right down to things like monologues. A friend of mine, we had a segment where you'd do the news. And so you could do like a playful skit around that. But I think I loved being able to tell stories and being able to act them out. And then I always felt like as far as the directing part was concerned, like it would be, you want things to go a certain way too. And it would be interesting to just also like be able to step behind the scenes.
Did you ever consider producing?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I fully knew what it entailed aside from
because
the money.
as you're talking about it, I think you have more a producer's mind than directing show or whatever. But I think you have more a producing mind because like what people don't like, the producer is kind of like the Wizard of Oz behind is the person that is kind of making everything happen. Everybody on the film is working for the producer, so you should really
consider that.
Yeah. Because with all these skill sets you have, anyway, I have like a pinball brain. It's just like things are lighting up.
Yeah.
I'll talk when the camera is off.
Okay.
So art and acting and stuff leads me to talk about your spoken word. I love the one. the things you shared, they're so personal though.
Yeah.
Like how are you able to share such personal stories, and how did you even get into spoken word?
Yeah. I think if I look at like the foundation of it, honestly, if I had to like trace it right to the beginning, I would actually say my dad. And it didn't start as spoken word. It started off as public speaking. So my dad, at work and in his role, and I think our culture too, used to give a lot of speeches and would encourage my brother and I to give a lot of speeches too. The way our culture works is like so many things are a speech opportunity, right? So when you go to visit somebody's house and you have to explain why you're there, that's an opportunity to give a speech and explain this is why it's a lot more than like, hey, just came to see you. It's a formal process in my culture. When you're leaving, don't just say.
Does that thing have a name? Like the saying why you're there?
The saying why you're there. If it does, I'm not too sure. The saying goodbye does. It's called kuoneka.
Okay.
And that is now telling people that you're leaving. And you reiterate, this is why we came. We're so grateful that we saw you, and now we're heading out. And it's a whole process. And my dad would teach us to do that. He would encourage us to do that. And he would give speeches as part of his job. And he had a book that was called, I think, like, Would You Please Say a Few Words, or Would You Like to Say a Few Words? I've forgotten. And I used to read that. So that really built up in me just public speaking and wanting to speak publicly as well. I'm going to say this. Don't ask me anything about it.
Okay.
Then I was really interested in being a rapper. So I know it's
why would you stifle the genre? Like, this is
just so you don't ask me to sample some of my work, which I don't. I mean, I was like 13. I had it was so funny. But
okay, so rapper, okay. I'm not gonna ask you to rap.
Yeah.
But can I at least ask why a rapper though?
Because I think at that time, for me, I was interested in music too.
Oh, right.
But then I liked poetry, public speaking. Like when you sort of bring it all together, right? Then I was like, oh, let me be like a rapper, which it just was a phase. But coming back to the spoken word, I think it became bringing together the public speaking. I didn't really want to I didn't want to be a rapper anymore. It's not like I considered it as a career or anything, but I kind of came into what does it look like to bring in spoken word and poetry and rap into into like just like beautiful pieces. And so I found it to be such a beautiful channel, particularly when my father fell ill and passed away with cancer. Passed away from cancer. What's the right way to say it? Now I'm going to get stuck in those. I'm going to be thinking about it. Passed away from cancer. There we go. Because then it was like, it's a way for me to like express my emotions, and what happened, and be able to write that. And I really, for me, I think then also getting the feedback from people, it was like, oh, there's a real gift there. And for me, again, coming back to my faith, is where there's a gift. It's also like, how do you utilize this as a tool to be able to uplift, encourage other people, and give God the glory? And so for me, then it became a tool that I was also using to tell my story, to tell the story of other people, to tell the story of, I think, who God is in my life. And I think that's how we sort of came to that. But it was really from my dad laying that foundation of like being confident to speak publicly, and having the creativity to like, how do you craft a speech, or how do you craft this piece? And then you bring the actress piece to it too. So I think it all sort of converged to spoken word. Yeah.
Wow. Condolences on your dad. Wow. Okay. You know what? We have to do this again, because I have so many questions and I'm like, running out of time. Okay, so I'm going to let you go with this one, though. You know, when you bring all these different aspects of you, the work you do, being a mom, juggling, your faith and everything, what are some things that you are doing just for you, right? Because all these things you're doing for all these other people.
Yeah.
What is something or some things that you do just for Chiedza?
Yeah, you know, this question is always so revealing. It's like the what do you do for fun? And I always shut down. I don't know. I don't know. It's like, it's a question that scares me so much because it's so revealing. As far as what am I doing for myself? And I would start off by saying not enough. It's a good question. It's a good question. I am probably not doing enough for myself. The things I love to do, I love to write. I love to write, and I think it would be nice for me to figure out how to carve out time to do those things for myself. And so, because I think you don't want to be serving or pouring from an empty cup, which I think can be very easy to do when you're doing things for other people and not for yourself. So here's hoping. I'll give myself the grace and tell myself that my son is a year old, so I'm slowly getting back into things that I do for myself. But my desire would be to do a lot more for myself around creative outlets. Even just small things. It doesn't have to be big things. Like, let me just have time to sit and write in my journal or read a book. I'm getting older, and your body will tell you I need to do things like that are fitness wise. I need to work out. I'm part of a tennis WhatsApp group. And I've been part of it for, I think, almost a month and haven't been to a single practice.
I was waiting for that.
That's terrible.
I was waiting for that to drop.
I paid for Fit for Less membership for a year and a half without going.
It's you.
But it's how they get you, though.
Yes.
It's how they get you, because like, you don't realize it's like $7 off your debit card, and you just don't realize it. Yeah. So I need to do that. So there are things that I need to do for myself. The question is always telling, because it makes me think that is absolutely important. There's a lot of pouring out that you do, and you just don't realize that you're not pouring into yourself. So. Wow. Good question. Next time you talk to me, hopefully I'll have
I'm now part of the I've played at least one tennis match. At least one.
At least one.
Chiedza, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much, Israel. I appreciate it. Thank you.